Welcome to the Biz Easy podcast, where small business is simplified for greater results. Brought to you by Resources and Development. Go to www.resources-development.com for help in taking your business to the next level. And now, help me welcome the host of the Biz Easy podcast, Steve McCrillis.
Welcome to the Biz Easy podcast, your resource to help take your business to the next level. My name is Steve, your host, as we all learn how to stay better focused on the things that make you great. Now, I'd like to introduce you to my partner and our resident guru of coaching, our lead business coach, Skip Williams.
Hey, thanks, Steve. How are you today?
Excellent. How are you?
Well, I'm really tired today. I stayed up all night wondering where the sun was, and then it dawned on me. And did you know that you can become an insomniac overnight?
Oh, man. Hit me with two right out of the blocks. Okay.
Right out of the gate, I gave you two bad ones. Anyway, while creating creativity and uniqueness are wonderful things, especially in business, because it separates you from the competition, it sometimes leads us to believe that normal or standard business principles don't apply to us because of that uniqueness.
I've heard so many business owners say, my business is unique to the industry, to the world, to you. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, and there is uniqueness, but that doesn't keep you from the principles of business. You think of business like you'd think of physics. In physics, we have simple laws of gravity, motion, mass, thermodynamics, and others that cannot or should not be violated. For example, every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, or a body in motion tends to stay in motion. The speed of light is constant. In today's crazy world, we've observed that many businesses seem to be making up their own rules, and some of them fly in the face of conventional business concepts. For example, I've heard profits don't matter, only number of eyeballs is important. or we, the country, don't need to manufacture anything. We can become a service economy or a service industry. You can sell your business for millions, even if it's never made a profit. The conventional thinking is that outsourcing is a great idea. Or I built this business for the customers, or I built this business for the employees. I don't care about growth. Or the only way to improve my business is to get more sales. Someone should give me money for my business because it's a good idea. Or as you've, I'm sure, heard, Steve, is if I build it, they will come.
Isn't that from the Field of Dreams?
I think so, yeah.
So are you saying, well, some of those I've heard more than several times. Number one is, all I need to do is improve my sales. Well, it comes back to the dollar taco story, and maybe that's a topic for another day, but are you saying that this conventional business thinking, all these quotations that you've heard and I've heard, are wrong?
More importantly, they can get you in trouble by thinking this way. That's correct.
True.
You know, if you're taking your example of the only way to improve my business is to increase the sales, when we know that there's other ways to make the cost of doing business less. You know, whether that's better sourcing, more efficiencies, higher throughputs, et cetera. So yeah, I think this type of thinking can get us in big trouble. You know, in the 1970s, I heard Rich DeVos give a speech that he called Man's Material Welfare. It's about the creation of wealth for both private wealth as well as national wealth. And it changed my life, Steve. If you're interested, you can find it on YouTube. But in that speech, he said, man's material welfare equals natural resources plus human energy multiplied times tools. So if you have the natural resources and the human energy, and you've got the trucks and the tools and things to produce more with less human energy, then you create wealth. And if you give up any one of these things, natural resources, human energy, or tools, or you give up the control of one of those things, then you cannot create wealth. To be clear, there's a lot of businesses where the owners may get rich, but that business redistributes wealth without actually creating wealth. But even those businesses will eventually fail if they're not serving businesses that do create wealth.
So hang on. What give me an example of what types of businesses add wealth and what types redistribute wealth, as you put it.
Well, I've simply put it in the past as there's only three real things that will increase the wealth of a nation, and that is manufacturing, mining, and agriculture. Because we're actually producing things that the rest of the world wants, as well as is used within our own country to make that country more valuable and more wealthy. So anything in those areas are, but whether you're a credit card company, insurances, gaming, these banking, these type of businesses, Wall Street, tend to redistribute the wealth that's created by the first three that I mentioned. And that doesn't mean they're not legitimate businesses, and you may own a business that doesn't qualify for one of those three things. But if you're not serving those businesses that do create wealth, then it's a slow decline to the bottom. So today I'd like to offer some of my own laws of business, Steve, and don't be afraid to stop and ask me to explain any of these, drill down on them and give you a little bit more depth on them.
I will.
But my list starts with, there are only two legitimate reasons to borrow money. The first is if that money can help reduce expenses, and the second is if that money can help increase revenues.
So I think by adding assets to increase capacity falls into the second category. Would you agree?
Correct. Yeah, it could reduce expenses, right? If it's reducing labor, but if it's also able to create more that you can sell, so it could actually do both.
The immutable laws of why you should borrow money versus just throwing it after cash flow.
Yeah, and unfortunately, most business owners don't only borrow money when they get in trouble. They've had a few rough months of cash flow, and they're borrowing money just to perpetuate what they've been doing. And you've really got to stop and think, how am I going to use this money differently in order to do either increase revenues or reduce expenses?
There you go. Good.
Another one is if you focus on net profit, you won't need to chase the cash flow.
Okay, so I have to stop you here. Too many times when I'm dealing with a business owner in an initial interview, I ask, explain to me in the best way that you can the difference between cash flow and profit. And I have to admit to you, I get deer in the headlights more often than not. So please expound upon that for our listeners.
All right. Well, cash flow is just, having enough money in the bank to operate. Oftentimes we're delaying our payables and we're trying to accelerate our receivables because we're in a cash flow pinch. But if we focus on the net profit, in other words, how much you're making per unit, and increase that net profit, we won't need to chase the cash flow, right? We can get ahead of that cash flow issue. So if we focus on the net profit of the business, we won't need to be chasing that cash flow, which is a lot of extra energy that could go into other things of advancing your business when you have to be dunning people on the phone for cash and so forth.
And that could be its own podcast when you think about it, because many people don't understand that quick relevance to chasing one versus the other. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. No, it's okay. Both businesses and economic economies have cycles, and you must prepare for both the up and the down cycle. And they all have their own unique aspects in order to deal with those things.
Sure.
It's better to end in pain than pain without end. It's how much you make in sales. It's not how much you make in sales. I'm sorry. It is how much you keep in profit.
My favorite.
You're always hitting on that, Steve. And I always appreciate it when you do. Efficiency is not as important as throughput.
Okay, going to stop you here again. When you talk about efficiency versus throughput, please explain.
Okay. This could be for any type of process, but it's probably easiest to imagine as a manufacturing progressive production line where each station adds its value to the end product. And what we traditionally do is we look at the efficiency of each operation and make sure that those people are working as hard as they can. We crack that whip, or we install technology that allows them to produce faster or whatever. That's focusing on the efficiency of an operation. Whereas I like to look at the throughput of the whole factory, for example. So it's not how much is going through each station, it's how much is going out the shipping door.
Okay.
Right. So when we focus on throughput, the whole process becomes a lot easier. So we're not looking at each operation now. We're looking at the operation that's holding us back, or is what we call the bottleneck. And it's a whole philosophy shift and change. Instead of worrying about squeezing every nickel out of every operation, let's squeeze more production out of the factory as a whole by addressing the bottleneck. And if we break through that bottleneck and another bottleneck forms, then we can focus on that one. But now it makes it a lot easier for us to focus our energies on what's going to ultimately make us more money, is shipping product out the door.
Gotcha.
If you treasure it, you should measure it. And we put that we put that one right on our new tape measures, didn't we, Steve?
That's right. On our slide.
Control the tools, supplies, and the labor, or they will control you. Create a win-win by understanding what's in it for the other guy. And very similar is, if you have to gamble, bet on the other person's self-interest. Don't pay the ferryman until he gets you to the other side. Jesus may want you to feed the poor, but your banker wants you to make a profit first. Whenever possible, smooth out business fluctuation. Analyze, adjust, rinse, and repeat. Always be humble, and people will wish for your success. We always hear stories about those who gambled and won, but there are far more stories that we've never heard of those who gambled and lost.
And living in Las Vegas, you can attest to that.
We built this city on that, right?
That's right.
The last person in on any deal gets to set the rules. With enough volume, you can almost produce it for free. And my favorite, you can't be altruistic if you're out of business.
Okay, I like that one. Where'd you first hear that?
I made it up. It's some of these I may have stolen, but most of them have come from me.
An official quote by Skip. Okay, I'm going to note that.
Truisms, or as a friend of mine calls them, skipisms.
Skipisms. Okay.
But it's funny in today's world, addressing that last one. There's so many people who want to create a product that's green to save the world, or they want to sell yogurt in order to support breast cancer or whatever. And those things are great, but if that's the reason you're in business, you might want to reconsider.
Yeah.
If it's a marketing tool, that's fine, but the real key is if you let them, your customers will swallow you whole, your employees will swallow you whole, your suppliers will swallow you whole, and don't get me started about the tax man.
Well, I hearken to a conversation you and I have had just recently about not-for-profits not showing a profit.
Right, and I've done a lot of work with nonprofits, and
Sure.
my mantra, even in a nonprofit, is profit is not a dirty word. We need to make as much profit in order so that we don't need to ask for as many and be as efficient with that as possible, so as not to have to ask for as much contributions.
Oh, there's a great motto to go by, no doubt.
Profit is not a dirty word.
Yeah.
Perhaps our listeners have some others to add to the list, Steve, and I'd love to hear from them if they have their own truisms. Right. I think this is just a start to a list, and I probably have some others that I didn't even think of for this podcast. In some careers, it's important to know physics, but for a business owner, it is critical to understand the physics of business. And I got a list here, Steve, of a few things that I think are important in regarding the physics of business, and I'll go through them. Stop me anytime. How knowing your break-even point and contribution margin is important to setting your daily, weekly, and monthly goals. Knowing how to the conversion equation is essential to good ROI on your marketing, on all your marketing. How to plan to get from where you are to where you want to be. How to negotiate with vendors and employees. How to add perceived value for your customers. How to pivot and take advantage as markets change. How to find the right employee for the right position. How to create a joint venture. How to expand your sales through upsell, downsell, and cross-sell. How to survive a lack of resources or maybe even a price war. How prices are set by what you can afford to sell it for in combination with what the market will bear. How to plan for profit rather than hope it'll be there at the end of the day.
Many of these things are great physics. They're great advice. In fact, that could be the running goal for many companies. And bringing those out, how to plan for profit and how prices are set. I think these are subjects that we can actually take and expand to our listenership to go through in more depth, because there's so much power in each one of those. How to create joint ventures, how to create a market dominating position. All these things are critical to any small business owner who wants to achieve greater than what they already have or greater than what they expect.
Yeah, and these are things I work on with clients every day, and we try to get to the next level through each of these principles. But to your point about planning for profit, rather than that goes back to that, if I build it, they will come, or if I open it, they will come.
Sure.
I mean, it's a great dream to open the business of your dreams, and hope they will come, but you've really got to do your math and figure out, how many units a day do you need to sell in order to stay in business, or how many units a day do you need to sell in order to get to your next goal.
Sure.
It's not enough to build a better mousetrap. It is essential to know where you are going and how to get there without violating the physics of business.
As we look at the physics of business and we look at all these questions, I think in the original business planning session, you and I have been confronted by many people who wanted a business plan, perhaps even pro formas and financial plans to present to get operating capital and opening capital to start their business.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they consider that these things aren't just things that you put on paper to demonstrate to a lender, because the lender wants to make sure you're going to pay the loan back. You need to make sure that you can plan from where you are to where you want to be. You need to negotiate with vendors and employees. You need to know how your product is going to have value to your customers. All the things that you just mentioned are so critical for small business owners to find. But what I've experienced is a small business owner gets into it because they're good at something. Maybe they're a good contractor, maybe they're a good chiropractor, or they're a good spa owner, whatever the case. They're good because they have experience doing it. And suddenly they're in this realm of, now I have to run a business to do it. So coming back to these critical things and knowing how they can elevate themselves as business owners, as businessmen and women, rather than just business owners, I think is very important, particularly when you get to that level where you're finding that you're keeping less, but making more, which happens in every small business owner's life cycle. They get to a certain point, they're making more money, but they're keeping less, and they're thinking to themselves, I think the only way to do this is wrap my arms around it again and reduce the amount of throughput, reduce the amount of revenue, reduce the amount of activity that's going on so I can recontrol it, instead of installing systems and operations to be able to plan it. And I think these are very important points. If we could go on for a few more days with, I think this would be something. In fact, isn't this in our book?
Most of it is. That's right.
Sorry.
Not a problem. You bring up a good point about business plans. We all start a business plan, write a business plan when we're starting the business, and then it goes on a dusty shelf and never gets looked at again. And that's not a terrible thing. I like to pull it out at benchmark times of the business cycle and see how I'm doing. and you'll probably want to rewrite at least your financials and so forth, and set, because you've learned some things and you've realized some realities, and then rewrite it. And if the reality is that you're not going to have as much business as you thought you were, which by the way is a really easy place when you're writing a business plan to lie to yourself, that then you need to figure out a way to stay in business and make a profit with less customers, with less units sold, whatever. And that's when efficiency comes in, and perhaps price increases, or a change in the way we market, whatever the solution may be. But we can readjust. So it's not critical that you go back and review the business plan as much as it is making sure that we're always prognosticating what the immediate future looks like. Forget what we thought it was going to be like in the business plan.
What's that expression of yours? Measure and adjust?
Analyze and adjust.
Analyze and adjust. Didn't mean to throw you off track there. So on closing, I would say a great physicist once said, the only thing constant in the universe is change.
Change. It sure is.
Keep that in mind as you move forward. That is our time.
One second, Steve. I just remembered a quote of Lee Iacocca. And this was when he was
Chrysler.
When he was in contract negotiations. It was probably in the 70s or early 80s. So keep that in mind when you hear the numbers. But when he was negotiating with the labor union, he said, "We have jobs for everyone at $18 an hour. We have jobs for no one at $22 an hour." In other words, you really have to conserve your resources to stay in business sometimes, and you have to make those hard decisions and find the people that are the right fit. And that goes with your vendors and your pricing with your customers and so forth. So that's all I wanted to add. Thanks.
That dates us a little bit. I will say that in terms of our history in business.
A little bit.
Time is up, y'all. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. And that is a
wrap. Take care, Steve.